Okay, shall we?
Yeah, let's go. You can kick us off. It's been so long.
Yeah, I know. Forgot how to talk on the mic.
Yeah.
Happy October, everybody.
Yeah, almost end of October.
No kidding. Halloween's coming up. Got a pretty sweet Joker costume I'm excited about. Just took my shirt and my vest to get it tailored at the laundromat. Got the green hair paint, so I'm going to have all this crazy hair in front of me.
Cool.
Got to practice my Joker laugh. Should be a fun time, though. I'll be interested to see what New York's like this year, because last year, with COVID just hitting, it was pretty dead. Usually there's a big Halloween parade in my neighborhood and a bunch of people dressed up real cool. And so that was a bummer missing that last year. So I'll be curious to see if it's going on this year.
I'd imagine it would be, right?
Yeah, I think so. It seems like most of those kinds of things have been picking back up.
Yeah.
I got to go to this, I met this friend at CrossFit, and she was visiting, and she got us free tickets to go to the New York Wine and Food Festival by the Intrepid on Pier 86.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And it was full event, it was normal full event and everything. I mean, it was outdoors, but it was great. I got to go Friday and Sunday. It's expensive. We got free tickets. That was awesome. But I think it's overpriced, but worth it kind of thing. You know?
Yeah.
You pay $175 for a ticket and you get little bites all day, but it was amazing.
Does it come with free, 2 free drink tickets or something, or unlimited?
It comes with unlimited drinks. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So we made it worth it. But no, Friday was Italian day, and then Sunday was barbecue. So they had all these briskets. They had pigs being roasted. They had
it's a multi-day
wings. Thing? Yeah, it's all weekend long. So I don't know what Saturday was, but Friday was Italian. Man, I had this sandwich, which made me just want to start crying. It was so good. It was so good. Of all the food there, the sandwich actually stuck out the most. And I wrote down the name, so I have to go check it out. But they're all local New York City places,
Nice.
Man, it was awesome. It had truffle oil on it and salami and this delicious focaccia bread. It was crazy. It was so good. And then, of course, the barbecue was just oh man, it's melt in your mouth. Brisket on the sandwich. There was this pastrami, which was incredible. There was this duck wing. There was, ribs. There was brisket. This dude just sitting up. It was hilarious. A scene out of movies. Buff dude in an A shirt and a tank covered in blood, but it was fake. But it was sitting up there chopping brisket all day, the longest line. It was so good though. And there was a DJ and free drinks. They had the themed drinks. So on the barbecue day, it was a lot of whiskey and bourbon and stuff like that. Cool. So it was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome.
How many people were there?
I would say, I don't know. I mean, hundreds, couple hundred for sure. But it's on one of the piers on the water, and
is that the pier that has the park on it?
It's right by the Intrepid, so there's no green there. I think it might be close to the park.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. It's literally right next to the Intrepid, Pier 86. So nice. Yeah, it was a good time. And the weather's just been incredible in New York last week or so. Yeah. So it was a perfect weekend for it, Nice. It's right now, it's 73 degrees, sunny out. So it's pretty fun.
Cool.
Yeah, favorite time of year in New York for sure.
Yeah.
Fall.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Well, yeah, it's been a while, but we've been busy with some consulting, but want to get back into this for sure. And yeah, we have some things to talk about here. So what are you thinking? What do you want to start with? How far back should we go here?
Let's go pretty far back, because I think
So we talked about the lazy initial values in the form. What about SSG app shell for dynamic segments that are partially known?
No, this is a problem. We haven't talked about this, but this was a problem we ran into on one of our projects where how do you statically generate a site in Next when some of the dynamic segments, but not all of them?
Right.
Do you remember this one? Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So you have a theme /post /ID. And let's just say at build time, you don't know the post IDs. Let's say there's they're constantly being added. But the themes you do know, there's a light theme, a dark theme, something like that. And
Maybe
so,
just those two.
Yeah, just those two. So how do you, like, what strategy do you want to do to basically get two different HTML files, one that's light, one that's dark, but then have like, an app shell, or just let the client side fill in the ID part of that URL.
Right. And so there's this whole long like decision tree that we ran down, because these are all the same, but you just want to tweak them, let's say, based on whether you're in dark or light theme, but you want to use the same components.
Yep.
And so you could just have like /dark / all that stuff, and then /light / all that stuff. Obviously, it's a ton of duplication, feels unnatural way to do it. So you do this, and now you have multiple dynamic segments. And I think in the app we were working on, they were using get static paths.
Yeah, I think that's what we ended up doing. Like you said, there was a giant decision tree. I think we did get static paths, and for the paths, we said, listen, we know the theme, so our paths were, light / posts / and then we just made up like a fake segment for the ID since we didn't know it, so we called it like __ ID. It's almost like we made our own dynamic segment. You could imagine we could have called it like bracket ID bracket.
Right.
And that let us define the paths, get two different HTML files that were like app shells for the light and the dark theme. And then,
right, because part of this is all you have to generate files that get served up, because that's the way Next does SSR.
Yep. SSG. Yep.
SSG.
So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So if you have if you know some of your dynamic segments, but not all of them, you can just put in a placeholder for the dynamic segments you don't know, and use get static paths, and that will work. It's kind of like what Next is doing anyway under the hood.
It just feels hacky.
It felt super hacky, but
yeah,
I can't think of any other way to do it, and it worked. I mean, it did work.
Yeah,
it did work. So
there was another wrinkle here, which was the way this app was doing like translations. It was using context and get static props. When you combine get static props with get static paths, you have some differences in behavior, right?
Yeah, there was a way we could render where we didn't know the props, but the way the app was coded, it was coded that you always have to know the props. So if you had we had like a dynamic segment that we didn't know till runtime, and therefore the first run of get static props is going to be empty while the page gets, generated on the server.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way this app was architected, that was like an impossible state. If you were ever in a state where you didn't know the props for a page, the app would crash.
Right. Which
that
was kind of like an incidental complexity of how the app was coded. But it's also still true that even if you were in a greenfield thing and you made all your own decisions, if you have multiple dynamic segments and then you want to implement get static props for something, and you have paths for like knowing, let's say that the first dynamic segment is like the language, and you want to know what the language is at build time so that the file gets only the translations in the language it's using, but then you don't know the post ID till runtime. That still is tricky, right? I mean,
super tricky. Yeah.
Which is why they have, I guess is why they have like a whole separate system for internationalization, because it's a special case. But it feels like you should totally be able to have multiple basically, if you had, you should be able to have multiple dynamic segments in your URL and pre-specify some of them. Yes. It seems a reasonable thing to want to do.
Yeah. I think one of the trickiest things about this is like when you're running in dev mode, you actually need to run the build and see what the paths the build has and what variables it has. And you also need to do like client-side navigation to see what Next is going to fetch as the first set of props when it has the info for the route versus when it doesn't.
Right.
So like you said, just giant decision tree.
How do you feel about it? I mean, in the projects that you've worked on, maybe in the side projects you've worked on, maybe also the consulting projects we've been doing with Next over the last over a year, that a lot of these things are these are costs that are imposed because of the need to do SSG, because of the architecture that Next imposes on you for a variety of good reasons. Do you think it's worth it for your side projects? Do you think it's worth it for most teams that we've worked with? If there was a way to opt out of it, could you do that to start and just do like an SPA, and then like that situation where, back in our Ember days, you have, big apps that are like built with Ember, like a, LinkedIn or a Intercom, where once you're logged in and using it, it's all dynamic data, but maybe you want the anonymous homepage to be a static page. So in that case, it's like, instead of making everything have to go through this SSG model, just take the easy path, which is building an SPA, and then statically render like the few pages you actually need to.
So I will say I like the Next model, and I like that as you build out pages, you can pick and choose a strategy. I think that's a huge plus. I also like the file system based routing. It's super constrained. I just see I worked on an app, I think it was like 2 summers ago, with just a crazy router, like crazy router, and no one understood it. It was one of those things where like, oh yeah, we understand it, and then 6 hours later you're questioning your sanity. And so like I do like that you can't do that stuff with Next. I do think that it's easy sometimes I'm writing a dynamically generated client-side rendered page, but I'm going to stuff a bunch of stuff in get static props and paths, like rather than just importing it, right? I'm just going to stuff it in get set. And it's like, you can give yourself enough rope to hang yourself there.
Right.
But overall, I think I do like Next. Also too, just like being able to build an SPA and then say, oh, the marketing page we need to statically generate. And there's a path there, where with other SPAs I've worked on, it's like we either build a new site or we start statically generating the whole thing and reworking everything.
Yeah.
So
there is a path there. I almost wish there was a higher level or more expressive API, because like we've worked on Next apps where every initial render is a loading spinner, but you end up doing all these backflips just to make sure each page server renders, when really you're not taking advantage of the server rendered shell. It's a data generated app, so you're not rendering a bunch of static content. You're not prefetching blog posts from a CMS and loading the top 10. That's all like down the road, right? And important for like different kinds of sites than usually the ones we work on. So if you're spending any time, in my opinion, to make a page work just to get the same dang index page with the freaking spinner.gif in it, it'd be much better to do like the way we did it with Ember, where you set it up and you just all, at the routing level, all requests to index/star go to index.html. That's your bootstrap page. And it's basically the SPA model, right? Yeah. If that is actually like what's happening. Though I guess saying it out loud now, like if every page is rendering that, I guess it's still nice that it's like code split, I guess, because like even if 2 different pages are rendering the same loading spinner, Next is still going through different paths in the app. They're both going through _app, so they're going to load everything that's global. But then if you're on an admin page that has a bunch of stuff versus this marketing page, then those bundles will be different. So that in that sense, it's very different from like the single bundle that we used to build in like OG Ember times. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You also actually get like files on your server that represent your paths, which you.
Yeah, but who cares about that?
I think it's nice. I mean, it's nice rather than just like pushing star to index.html and then having every response be a 200 and
I should go back in time and ask you if it was nice when we were trying to get all those themes in the different files in the Next build, and it's like en/checkout/ something .8, and it's all the same stuff. There, it feels like it's like I don't know if leaky abstraction is the right term here, but it's
I think with that, you can point to the initial implementation was off.
Right.
Misunderstanding of static paths versus dynamic paths.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe abusing them for the wrong thing. I'm not really sure.
I do think there's tension between I'm building a marketing site and I'm building an SPA. And I do think that Next tries to do a good job of like, oh, I'm building an SPA, so I have all the tools to do client-side rendering, versus like, oh, I'm building a marketing site, so here are the paths I want to generate, and I can pre-generate all my HTML. I think Next does do a good job of that, but sometimes like those two worlds clash. And I think you ran into an example this week with layouts and like how to think about layouts.
Yeah. Totally. Also, it's also like, I guess one way to ask this is like, as a Next developer, should you be thinking about what HTML pages generate on the server? And I think my argument would be like, you shouldn't have to, but the reality is like, once you embrace that, it makes your job a lot easier. So in that sense, it is a leaky abstraction. Like if you start a brand new Next app, create a page, JSX file, JS file, put some React, return some JSX and go, you're done. And you're not going to have to think about server rendering or anything. And so to me, that's like, it's like you said too, you're developing the app in Yarn Dev. You're not really generally doing Yarn build as part of your dev flow on a day-to-day basis until something comes up. And I think the idea is most of these libraries and stuff we use in the APIs from Next, like, are graceful in both environments. And so a lot of times it just works, something that's client side only uses an effect and therefore doesn't get run on the server. So you don't have any errors about like window not being defined or whatever. But obviously like you run into that stuff with Next. So at this point you do have to be aware of it. You have to understand why like your node console is throwing an error about window not being defined. You have to understand why the browser is showing you the HTML doesn't match on the first render, all those sorts of things.
I mean, a great example of this is sometimes you can use router and you'll have the query param available right away.
I mean, that's got to be that's the thing that's like bit me a lot. I mean, I was just doing my Tailwind course in Egghead and I just ended up doing like, if router's not ready, return null, just to avoid it. I don't have to explain it or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely something. I guess I agree with you that it does leak because, I mean, proof is in the pudding. I do have to run Next build and make sure that like my build files aren't erroring. I think this matters in like really, really complex apps that might not, that might be coded for going through certain paths with a lot of global context. You can always make an argument like, oh, it's a misunderstood app, but these are things we do run into. So,
I think I would say, as a more advanced developer, it's nice feeling like I have the tools and the capabilities to do whatever I want on any page. And it's not like they're hiding anything from me. I can check if I'm in Node or I'm in the browser. I can do things on the server. I can control what page gets built for which URL. But if you look at the onboarding experience for folks who are newer to Next, the mental model that they teach, the story is just create a page and you're going to get an SSG static thing as well as the client and you're not going to have to worry about it. So then when these things start coming up, it can be confusing. And I wonder if it'd be better to just say up front, instead of trying to have this magical thing where you gloss over this huge detail, it's like, when you make a page, here's how you develop it. And then here's how you check the server thing. And like when your user visits a URL, which is you're exposing a new URL by creating a page, which is a big decision for a lot of apps because it has implications for your state that's ephemeral in
entry
React.
Point. I mean, it's a new entry point.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't quite get the gravity of that right away. Oh, let's just make a new page. Now you have to think about back and forward and reload there. You have to think about if the state should survive reloads and therefore should be persistent state that lives outside of your React application. We've seen all this stuff on multiple projects at this point. So it's almost like you could imagine them saying, when you want to expose a new URL, you create a page. The first part to think about this is like the user visiting that URL and like what's going to happen, what code they're going to get. And then it's going to do what you're doing in Next Dev, but like you need to think about these things, which in my opinion is like it's a lot. Again, it's nice for like a power user situation or for people who are creating abstractions to like create things that make that do this stuff. Obviously, it's like really hard, especially back in the days like Ember and even early Ember fast boot. Like you don't have that level of granularity at all. It's like hard. But in my opinion, like the DX of using Ember serve and just it always working the same way in both, production and your computer is like a massive mental win in terms of just like the complexity you don't have to worry about because it's just one way through the app and it's the same way in either situation.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if you visit /post and then click to /1, or if you like visit /post/1 and then go back to posts. Those are all the same because in Ember, they're loading the same code. The router's props are getting set, and then you're calling like .navigate. And same as if you do an initial render on either page, or you start on one page and click a link to another. Whereas in Next, it's completely different. I mean, it's just two completely different flows. If you load the page initially on one URL and then click back versus loading it on the other and then click forward, they're running different code. I mean, they're running completely different code.
Different. I mean, they're different bundles.
It's different bundles. Yeah.
I think Next is, I'm not ready to say that like, oh, I prefer the Ember way. I mean, the Ember way is simpler, but it was just client-side rendering.
Right.
So with Next, at least like, yeah, it's more complicated, but I have different ways
more
to
power.
generate. Yeah, I have different ways to generate my site. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is not so much about like Next. It's more about like Next decision to impose SSG on every developer, on every app, on every Next app. It's like, because I love Next. Obviously, I love Next. I mean, Next is like industry standard at this point, honestly. But like, it's more about the question like you're making either an app or a part of an app that's like the SSG stuff is you're just going to see every team do the same thing. They're going to SSG a loading spinner because they don't want to deal with it because it doesn't matter because the client side is what's fetching the data in the first place. The client side has the auth. They're not running servers to do data fetching the way we do it, the way they recommend you doing it. So you're not going to, you might get around to doing a skeleton screen, but you might not because that's a lot of work. And so you might just do a blank screen or a loading spinner, which is totally fine. And that's what I do in my apps. Like, I mean, if you want to do the details and try to get a skeleton screen, that's one thing, but it's not like a cool, you know what I'm saying? It's just, it's extra work. It's just extra work.
I think the tension comes in here when you do the loading screen and then you add in the get static paths and then you also have like dynamic segments. So I'm almost like just kind of envisioning like, I don't know, you have some like choose your own adventure that's like, what is your URL? There's like any data. There's like anything in this URL, like specified data that gets loaded. So if you had like post/123, you'd like circle the 123. And then it's like, is this thing edited or like, is this thing never changed? I don't know. Just like a whole bunch of, because it's kind of like what we do. And then like you end up at a path that's like, this is your page. Because again, it's,
you don't, but you find out those questions and answers implicitly via things like router.query being undefined. And it's going from being defined on the first render to being undefined. So you do like, you make a change, you add a segment, you add get static paths or whatever. And then the behavior change, which is, again, it's making you realize, oh, okay, this means this URL that I've exposed, this entry point to my app, is going to have content or it's not going to have content on first render. Whereas really that should be the way you're thinking about it to start with. Like when you create a page, you're exposing a new entry point. The first question you ask should be, what should the user see when they first load this page on this URL? But usually when people add pages, they're in the midst of coding user flows where users might be clicking links and stuff, and they're thinking about it in the context of a user flow. Yeah. But because Next imposes SSG and because pages are new entry points, that's really what you have to consider that. And it's easy to not think about it when you're in the middle of doing whatever you're doing. I think that's the way to sum up like my problem with it and what I would like to see like address either through the storytelling or some APIs or warnings or something like that.
Yeah, that was well said. Definitely well said because yes.
It's like router query just went from, by the way, your URL just fundamentally changed because you added a dynamic segment and router query is not going to be known, so I don't know how they would do that, but it's like you need red alarm signs to go off at that point, because again, otherwise, with everything going on in a real production app, and we've seen this pair with people who are working on this, even us ourselves, it gets really confusing. You trace all these use effects, everything happening from the root app to a page, and now you've changed the behavior through one of these hooks. And there's just a lot going on there. So, it's interesting. And then throwing deadlines and all that stuff. So,
yep.
We did talk a little bit about the nested layout stuff. I don't know if I want to rehash all that. I actually did. So we were talking. I did do that video of my egghead course, which I finished actually recording last week, and it should come out on Egghead in like December, which is coming up a lot closer than I used to think. So
nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's about 21 videos, like a little over 2 hours, and it's building a Discord clone with Tailwind. So the idea was to make it a way to learn Tailwind that's not just like, here's how you change text color for some text. Here's how you change some padding. It's like, let's build a real, like, basically pixel for pixel clone of Discord. And
you're underselling it. When you alt tab, I mean, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
When you alt tab between the real Discord and your clone, like, you can't, everything lines up.
It's pretty awesome. I've been meaning to throw it up on I don't even know what they're called right now. Zeit, Now, Next, Vercel. I literally just had a brain fart of forgetting what they're called. I've been meaning to throw it up on Vercel and just share a link because it is fun to click around. But and you run into lots of little fun details along the way building something like that. But anyways, I ran into this thing where we were talking about, Discord has like a master view, it's like master detail list, like the way you would see like Spotify. And with Next, there's no like built-in notion of that sort of thing with something like outlets, which exists in React Router and exists in Ember. And you're telling me you really like that because you think about the page as the entry point. So if you change a URL from like /servers1 and then you go to add nested channels, so it becomes /server/1/channel/1, then you just move the page under a folder with a dynamic segment. And I was like still stuck when I first encountered this problem. I was still stuck like in the nested outlet mental model, and was like, no, I want to keep my like sidebar in the app, have an outlet for the servers, put that in like the servers, have an outlet there, and then have a third page for the channels. Anyways, I don't really want to go back all the way through it. It did work out nicely how it worked because I didn't happen to need the persistence of the server thing, or maybe just because even when I changed channels, it didn't mess up the scroll bar. I don't know. Something about it was pretty nice. But all that to say, what was the point of all? There was a point to all that.
Did you try Adam's layout thing?
Didn't even have to do that. I just did it. I just literally moved the page, and I think the scroll bar doesn't move because the reconciler or whatever, it's rendering the same component.
I thought
it doesn't like re-render anything.
I thought you needed Adam's.
You do for certain things, but in this case, I didn't. I'm not really sure why.
Adam's thing is really good. It's like when you're setting it up, you're like, am I going off the happy path? Like, why am I doing this? But then you get it set up and you literally never think about it. And it's really good. I mean, it really works. Good. Yeah. It gives you like
I have a feeling something like that will end up in Next with that sort of thing, even if it's just a blessed version of
where you like just export the layout or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. But I still do like the outlets, like the outlets. I have this like React Router 6 demo beta video where I spent like 45 minutes building a bunch of this kind of thing on my YouTube channel. And I think that would be like hard to do that in Next, or you'd end up recreating a lot of the APIs in React Router. So, but there was a reason I wanted to say that connected to our last discussion.
Well, I think that's part of the tension with like, I'm building SSG, website versus I'm building an SPA where like, I can just do like the Russian doll routing and
right, exactly. Anyways, I can't remember exactly what I was going to say, but no, it ended up working out quite nicely. So I do expect to see some more layout primitives land in Next at some point in the future. I do. because people are pretty much on their own right now, which is fine. But, we talked also about like, without the outlet, sometimes you end up pulling out components and like having pages render components to reuse things. Even if you have like a header, that was part of what our interesting point of our conversation was like, you have 2 pages, you start sharing stuff. What do? Do you pull them into app, so that they're there? Do you extract them as like a header component, and then every page you render, like you have to import header and use it? Seems kind of silly. Mm-hmm. And then also if you have a situation where you navigate across pages, even though both those pages render the header first thing, it might lose some ephemeral state because it's like a new component instance. I think that's I guess that's back to the nested layout stuff.
Yeah, I think but that gives you a place to make the call. You can say like it's persisted, therefore it goes in app, or like it's not, and I want it to reset.
Right.
So
right. Cool. What about this available categories.length and new goal form button versus form submission that validates server side on submission? Oh, yeah. Okay, so this was an interesting one. I think we actually did talk about this with the initial values and stuff. And I'm getting to a spot where I'm pretty happy with how I'm doing forms now in my fitness project, because I just finished doing a pretty tough one. Surprisingly tough, actually. Like I used to have, so in the app you like create goals, and I used to have it where you like add new goal, you select the goal from available category, like working out or nutrition. You set how many times per week, the frequency you want to do it, and you hit save. Then you go back and do it again. You go back. So I made this modal where you hit add goals, and it comes up and it just shows you all the categories. You can tap them if you want to select them, and then you can choose their frequency, and you hit one done button, and it saves all of them. So it's cool as Hasura. You can do that in bulk. And then once you have your goals, you can hit edit, brings up the same form with everything selected. And you can tweak them and hit done again. And that's just going to like, in the background, those might be like deleting, goals or updating goals or adding goals, but it's doing it from the user's perspective in all one form submission, which is it's just so cool. It's just so, amazing. It's like it's still, it's like a perfect example of like, it's just that tickles your little nerdy fancy, right? Where it's like, it's like the UX, the database is not driving the UI. Whereas even it inadvertently was almost doing it in the past. I was thinking about it like, these are goals and I need to CRUD them. So now I have like /goals1, delete, blah, blah, blah. Really, this is what you want. And the fact that like when you submit this form, you might be creating goals, you might be deleting, it doesn't matter. So it's just really cool that we can do that kind of thing. And I still didn't have to write any like backend code for it. And it's like, how long did we code UIs without bulk operations like that? I mean, it's incredible. It's awesome. GraphQL is so freaking awesome, man.
Oh,
it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's just so good. So, the thing that I kept running into here was like, let's say you can only see this. This is how I used to have it. Now that I have it like that, it doesn't work like this anymore, but I still have some similar problems where, let's say you fetch your weekly goals and then you show this form, right? And the selected elements of the form are based on your current weekly goals, right? And so let's say you hit edit goals, and then you open another tab and you change a goal and save it. And then in the background, your current one refreshes because they're all reactive. And that's a problem because the user's working with form data right now, and then all of a sudden the data changes. So obviously like props in React are reactive and you like want them to do that, but I'm landing on this pattern with forms where like you don't, because like
you absolutely don't. You don't want the form to change out from underneath you. Like you said, you're editing it. Exactly.
So like really conceptually you're working with draft data, and I've been wanting to like figure out how to like enforce this. It's like a snapshot, or it's a draft, or it's a copy. I kind of like snapshot because that actually communicates the point that when you click edit, the user clicks edit, they're looking at a snapshot of the data, and the developer is aware of that, and they're aware of the fact that the data could change, and if it's changing and they want to do something about that, they need to handle it. But by default, most don't, right? Like most forms, and we don't really usually think about this. Usually when you look at a tutorial with a form, you have like a person form and you're like person equals person. You just pass in the person. And if it changes, it's going to screw everything up.
Yeah. Or this is the same thing that you just said, but like data equals use query, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then give my data to the form and it just works. But the problem is
exactly.
You're thinking about a single shot render. That's not how you should be. You should be thinking of your app as always reactive, and someone could come in and flip a Boolean that makes use query, use WebSockets, and be just always in sync. And so, or it just
does like the auto refresh, the stale while revalidate thing, which happens to me. It's happened to me. Or you like hit submit on the form, which causes the data in the background to update, and then it puts your form in like an invalid state because now available categories is empty. The form shouldn't even be rendered, right? Whereas from your perspective, the available categories at that point were really at the point in time when you clicked edit. Right.
I will say that like Formic, I think, does a good job here. They have like initial values, which do get like, for lack of a better word, snapshotted, cached.
Yeah.
And then if you want those initial values to like be live and update, you have to explicitly opt into it with like
an enable reset or something like that.
Yeah, like enable reset or something like that.
Yeah. No, that part's great. The problem is you're rendering Formic in like your goal form, which does have those things, and you could have other logic in the goal form.
I see what you're saying. So
that depends on it being in a valid state.
So you just want to say like any data I'm using to build this form needs to be cloned, copied, snapshotted, whatever.
Non-live, non-reactive. I don't want to be thinking about this changing. And if I come in a situation in a user flow where I do, like I want to let the user know that actually there aren't any more available categories since the time you clicked edit. And I need to tell you this now, but usually you could probably just wait until they click save and let the backend errors do the handling and just say, oh, that's not valid anymore. Oh, you ran out of time or whatever. But I feel like that's a layer on top. I think by default, you want non-reactive state and you just want to deal with the flow to get it all working. That's like the easy case, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm doing now.
Go ahead.
I kind of have this like, you're going to hate this so much. So I was like, I show this goal form from two different parts in the UI because I have like a 0 state. So when you don't have any goals, it's like, add your first goal to start tracking. So I render it down here. And then if you do have it, I like render in a different spot. So there's two places that need to like pass in the user's current weekly goals and the categories to this form. So first I was doing it at the calling site because I was like, no, my form shouldn't care like what it's getting. It should just be able to like render all the categories and what the goals are and let you edit them. So I was like having in the parent, my week component, I was like doing a ref. First I was doing a ref with like available categories, draft ref. And then when you render it, when you click edit, you like set the current value of that to like the latest value of available categories. And then you show the goal form. And what gets passed in is like available categories ref.current kind of thing. So that's not going to change, even if available categories in the parent changes. But then I was doing it in like two places and I was like, this is kind of weird. And I almost would rather like be thinking about this when I'm in the form than when I'm in the parent. Like I'd rather just want to pass those things in. And also it's kind of like how Formic works, right? You just pass in props that are reactive, but Formic uses an effect to only capture the first value, right? So then I had them passed in as live props to the form. And then I was doing things in the form like using a ref or like using a new variable. I was trying different things like a variable in like scope that I just set if it's not there. And it's like you pass in weekly goals and then you have like weekly goals draft or like weekly goals snapshot. And I was like, this sucks. So all I'm doing now, so you get weekly goals as a prop to goal form. And then in the first line, I use state and I pass in weekly goals as a default value. And then I reassign weekly goals to that. So I say weekly, I say, you know how with use state you like let bracket.
Yeah. Actually,
count.
I don't think that's
I do weekly goal. I do bracket weekly goals without the setter equals use state weekly goals. So the first time it renders, it uses the version of weekly goals that gets passed in at the time when the user clicked edit as the default value for state. And then it's going to get used over and over again across re-renders because it's in React state, and it's never going to get set because I don't even call the setter.
By the way, you said I was going to hate that. I think that's totally fine. I think that's way better than using a ref. I think it's way okay. So the reason I didn't want to use a ref is because I was hating using .current everywhere. It's ridiculous. And okay, my problem with this is like, use state. It's an abuse of use state. You're not even calling the setter. This is what a ref is for, to share data across renders, right? Okay, yeah,
if you're not,
yeah,
I used to say this, like if I've seen this in code before, it's a huge code smell to me. If you're using use state without ever calling set, it's not state. But in this case, it actually kind of is. You could imagine calling like on the render, if we don't have weekly goals, set weekly goals to the default value, but I'm just kind of abusing the default value for that, but it's fine.
Right. Okay, I agree with that. I was going to say like you could imagine writing like a use snapshot hook, and that would use state, and you could,
nice.
You could call the setter that's like recapture or something like that, right?
Right.
So
update. Yep.
I do see this using
that's
state.
True.
Like, yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, you're not.
Yep.
It is a smell if you're using state, but you're never calling the setter because you never need it to re-render.
Yep. I like what you said though, because there is it's a snapshot. You could imagine keeping the hook could actually keep around the latest version.
Yeah.
It's like use buffered query basically. Yep. It's you could diff it. You could keep around the latest version, and you could have a function that you return from this that says, update snapshot. So that's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
But I like that. It was fun though. It was fun to land on that, and also like I just wanted some pattern where I could just type weekly goals throughout my form. I didn't want to be going weekly goals snapshot ref dot current dot map, and you're doing all this stuff in the form is already verbose anyways. So this was pretty cool. From the caller's perspective, you just pass in the weekly goals and categories. From the form's perspective, right at the top, you redefine them, but now you don't have to worry about it. And it's nice. You hit cancel, everything goes away. It's all ephemeral state. You could tweak those things as much as you want. It's all gone, which is what you want in this kind of, when building UIs like this. You want the ephemeral state tied to the component lifecycle. It's great. I don't have any refs to clean up in the parent. You know what I mean? It just it made it really nice. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty happy with that.
Hey, just to beat a dead horse. So it's almost like this like snapshot state is like derived state from props, right? So it's like if I don't have any state, I want to derive it as like the first render from the prop.
Yeah.
And so like in that example, like in the hooks world, you do use state and you just call set state on basically like the first render. Like if
you could do that. Exactly.
I know, which is basically
the
what you're doing
with
the default state. So I think it might be okay to actually use state in this situation, even if you knew you were never going to call the setter. It's almost like you do have one call the setter. It's just like that first render.
Yeah, as a convenience instead of having it null and then like if the state doesn't equal call set on literally the first render or whatever.
But I would do exactly what you did. I would put it in the state thing, and I would never have the setter even be available.
For
Pretty
sure,
cool.
That I know it's weird. It actually is really cool. Because like as ugly and as horribly offensive it is to like my sensibilities when I was first doing this, if you actually look at it, I'll just show you right here. It's actually pretty sweet. But yeah, I'll throw it in podcast topics. Yeah, I do it for the categories, weekly goals, and last week's goals. And then you just work with it, and it works pretty well.
Oh, interesting.
And again, it's nice to know.
You reassign the props.
Yeah.
So there's no let or anything. That's
if you do let it, I know. If you do let it argues at you, obviously, because there's I know. That's why it's so gross, right? But it's
definitely at first glance gets my interest. But yeah, I mean it's fine, right?
Because you don't want to call it different. You don't want the person to pass it in to be different. You don't have to reassign it in the args. You could do that. Like that's what I did for a little bit. Like in the props, weekly goals : reactive weekly goals, and then like let weekly goals equals use state reactive weekly goals. But data is reactive in React, so I just I felt like this was the spot to call out. I didn't want to mark the props as being reactive because that's not a special case. I wanted to mark these as being snapshots. That's the special case. The fact that this data is not changing.
Yep.
So I think a use snapshot's the way to go. I still like the reassigning because it's just, it's kind of like, it's kind of evil a little bit, but I kind of like it. So, and I want to work with categories throughout my form. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to rename the props. So
it's funny, just like thinking of like functional verse OO here, right? And like OO, we would have like some like way to freeze it or capture it. No, we'd probably still assign. Never mind. We'd probably still assign it to a different variable. I was wondering if this might be a case of having to name things and having props and wanting to have the variables the same versus like doing something.
I mean, you could certainly do, on close and then like ... rest. And then you could just do, let categories equals rest use state rest dot categories.
No, but I like this better because then there's actually important information that's hidden in the ... rest. And
exactly like what's there. So
this
is my next question.
Let's put this screenshot. This is an awesome screenshot. Let's put this in the show notes.
Yeah, let's do it. Get some get some haterade coming our way. My next question about this was, I wanted to figure out a way to enforce this. So it'd be cool if anytime I'm working on a form, I don't like forget to think about this problem. And then something happens like what happened to me where like by saving the form, it revalidates the data in the background, which changes one of the props coming through, which puts my form logic in an invalid state. I want to like avoid that. And so I was wondering if you could make like a form. How would you do this in TypeScript? Like, could you make it so when you pass a form, you have to either like pass in like a snapshotable or you have to snapshot something before you render it to pass it into a formic. So that way, you're like not reactive.
Yeah.
It's just this. Yeah, I think this is the kind of stuff that like you just think about how many like code paths and code flows there are like in a reactive UI. And it's like the stuff I see bite people a lot. Not, these things change. It'd be nice to call it out.
Well, I was thinking too, like, okay, love React, love the reactivity, love the mental model. 99% of our consulting projects, like not even like the index table of the data is supposed to be reactive. You know what I mean? And so I think this is like having a good first class way to mark this stuff and think about it throughout the app is good. And I'm not enough of a TypeScript ninja to say that like, oh, when you start using Formic, you have to, all these things have to be wrapped in a like thing that's snapshotable. Like you have an object with a symbol that says it's snapshot. How to validate that, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure you could. Like I'm pretty sure you could find something.
Yeah. Honestly, man, maybe it's just like instead of Formic, it's use Formic. And then if you did have a lazy initial function that only ran the first time, you can do your logic in there. And then Formic's taking care of just keeping a snapshot of that, not changing it. And so maybe if it's just, maybe all it really needs is a slight tweak on those APIs. Because remember, those initial things run every time. And so you can still get into trouble there, if that makes sense.
Because you're like accessing data off them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Available category 0.id, like the first available category. What if it goes down to an empty array? You should never even be in that form in the first spot because you're not rendering it unless there's categories available. But now you are because the data's been reactive, the form's already open, and you're in a bad spot. So,
man, this is where you just get into like, why are you even building a reactive site?
I know.
But I'm not going to entertain those people.
No, well, definitely not. And also, like the stuff in my form that is reactive and working well, it's like I couldn't build. I mean, you saw some of the screenshots I've been working on of the form.
They're awesome.
Coming up, and and I wouldn't even know what to do. Where would I put the JavaScript for that? I mean, it would suck. So that's why I'm doing it. It's awesome. It's just this stuff is it's you just want it to air loudly, and so you understand what's happening. Because when this happened to me, it was like, wait, why am I trying to accessing this? This shouldn't even be there. I think Snapshot's pretty good though. I think it's pretty good. I'd like a use snapshot. It'd be pretty cool. Categories equals use snapshot categories. Boom. Pretty
I like
neat.
it. And just getting into like,
it really is just use state basically.
Yeah, and getting into the habit of just knowing like I'm building a form and this data is like I don't want it to change underneath me. And so therefore it's like a snapshot. And Matt, if everyone on your team thought like this, I think you'd be in a really good, like it's a really good like way of thinking through this stuff. So
it is, because like think about, and the other flip side of this is, in this case it doesn't happen because the goals are behind the modal in the UI. How many times have we had reactive forms where you're changing the edit and then your big H1 first name in the background starts changing and you're like, wait, what? Cancel it, flip. You have to reset the state. All that crap sucks. I mean, that's 99% of the time not what you want. So I think if you just render a form, create a snapshot of data, you go to town with it, you persist it, and then if you hit cancel, it all goes away. Also, dude, the pattern I'm still using where anytime you do a mutation, you just refetch all the queries as part of the save mutation. So by the time the form goes down, the UI is all up to date. I mean, it's just, this is such a good thing. Like you have this isolated form over here that's getting data from wherever. It makes a copy of it and you can just go crazy. And when you actually have the data you want, you save it. And then the form doesn't care about anything else. Doesn't care about how these props are changing. Doesn't care about what queries need to be revalidated. You rerun all of them and then it works. So I really love this decoupling. And I love that you can have isolated data changes that go back to persistent state. And it's these two things talking to the server, but they also kind of know, the form knows what's being rendered and to refresh it. But it's like, instead of just complicated passing data around, you know what I mean? And passing callback, you're not passing callbacks around. You're not merging data. You're just saving a mutation and then refetching from the server. It's pretty awesome. It's really cool.
Nice.
I'm pretty happy with the pattern so far. It's been fun working on the app the last week. So cool, man. Well, we have quite a few other cool topics here, but I guess we're running up on time. So should we save these for next week?
Yeah.
Or you want to talk about some of these? You want to talk? Is there one of these you want to touch on?
What do we got? Like, yeah,
Since
we can
we're
do
on
one
the
of
mics.
these. We got to do these in like 5 minutes. Let's talk about this fake test data. I ran into to a problem. I think you'll like this. So, let me just describe the problem, and I can say like what I like and what I don't like, but this is interesting. So we were working on an app that is like a checkout process, and you have to go through this big long checkout process, set up a profile, enter your payment information, enter your address, and then check out. And the address validation, there's like a lot of address validation rules, like a lot. Like you can't ship to a PO box. You can't ship to this type of address. Like it actually validates like certain street names. Lot of address validation. And so we were using Faker to fill out all these forms. So we would get like a new first name, a new address, a new so on. Some of the addresses would fail the address validation. So they would have like the letters PO in them, which the library thought was a PO box, which you can't ship to a PO box. And so it would fail the test. And so I had like two thoughts. Like the first thought I had was like, wow, this is super annoying. Like I'm getting like flaky tests. I can't commit my code and I have no idea what's going on because when I like rerun the test, it passes. So I was like, man, the fact that this form uses like fake test data is like, it's like, I'm trying to work on some other feature way over here. And this has now just become my problem. Yeah, so that was one. And then the other, yikes.
I could just see it's like the person sitting there, maybe me 6 months ago, you're typing and you're like, oh, that one seems, sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't. That's not my problem. Commit, it's not today, enter.
It's just like, I have a lot to get done today and like address form. Why are you failing? Like, I don't have time for you. Right. On the other hand, the fake test data actually found a problem with this address form. It actually found a problem. There were certain addresses that were valid addresses, but because they had certain letters in them, they were failing the validation.
Oh,
so there's
interesting.
like,
So it's almost like throwing the random test at it, like the way they do in Haskell.
Like quick check. Where
quick check. Yeah,
throw a bunch of things. Yeah. So like, I was super super conflicted on this, where it's like, this is super annoying because it's like now burden for other developers. Also, I should say, like, this app is worked on by like a lot of developers. There's a lot of different sub components. So when one part starts failing, like, you don't really know like why that's failing or how to fix it. So that part felt like a burden. On the other hand, it was like, this actually found a bug. Like, this actually
that's cool.
Found a bug in the code. So it made me, it just made me want to talk about like fake test data. How to think through it. Is there like a world where it's like, if I'm developing a feature, I'm just using static test data on the app, so I can get my feature in, but then maybe when it like goes to CI uses fake test data, because then like the rest of the team is involved, and like the person that worked on that address thing can actually say, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah. First thing I'll say is, every single time I use Faker, I immediately do faker.seed123. So I don't know if this was doing that or not.
This was not, because it literally every single test run would have like different address.
Yeah, it shouldn't. Unless, now you can still get in a situation. So I always do that. As soon as I import Faker, I just do faker.seed123. You can use any seed you want, doesn't matter, but I just do 123.
You just seed something. Yep.
Exactly. So then when you like server create an address, it'll use the same value every refresh. So for sure. So that would solve that, because then at least there wouldn't be any flakiness. Because if you could still have a situation where the fake address was like incorrectly failing validation,
but it would always be the same fake address.
Exactly. And then you could figure out what to do with it. You could change the seed, whatever. You can still get in a situation where like you add a server create later, and then like it kind of readjust things, or like in front of it, and it would like change it, but it wouldn't change it on every refresh. It would just change it as you were like creating more data and like calling Faker functions again. So yeah, faker.seed, absolute must right away. Because I even in development, when I'm doing development, if I refresh, I want to see the same thing. Let's say I'm using UUIDs and you visit a page, you want it to be there, all that kind of stuff.
Or just like, it's just a lot of cognitive visual information to take in.
You're looking at Jane and then it goes, Mary, whatever. Yeah, it's a lot. So that probably would have solved the worst and most annoying parts of that. So that's just for like
for sure. I kind of look at that answer as like, that's more, you should be using static data, because you get like you get consistent test runs, which is really what this is about.
Exactly. Yep. But yeah, man, I mean, on the bigger picture of just fake data, like, it's hard, man. And I still think about this a lot just because of the amount of work we've done in Mirage. But even working on my own thing, it's like, I pulled up Faker and trying to get stuff going or use all the different libraries. It's just getting production like data can be really hard. Getting it easy in a lot of different states can be really hard. I don't know if there's a good solution here other than like taking time to curate good sample data sets. I'd love to work on this product, like a good UI for this, but it's important,
Absolutely. I mean,
every time I've spent time curating like different scenarios that let me quickly put the app. I mean, again, most of the apps we work on are like completely data driven, and you want to see what it's like when there's no goals, when there's 3 goals, when you have 5 goals completed last week, 2 weeks ago. Like, that's hard to do all that, and you can always like kind of fake it with production stuff and hopefully see the state you need. But I usually take the extra time and try to curate a couple of those scenarios because, first of all, I'm already writing tests for it. Second, it's just really, really nice to not have to log in, to be able to pull it up on iOS Simulator and not deal with logging in and having the right cookie and how's that going to work. I can just put the app exactly in the state I need to, especially when I've been doing this stuff on iOS Simulator. It's awesome. Localhost 3000, and it's already like logged in as a user with 2 goals last week, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough though. It's a tricky problem overall. You have test data going stale against production data, or like the shape of it changes or the contract breaks or whatever. But I think in your the specific answer here, the seed would have probably helped that particular issue.
I know it would have, but then it wouldn't have found the bug, which I think is
that's true.
Ultimately, so then the super interesting part of this that actually did find a bug.
Yeah, I guess if you wanted, it's kind of like the quick check thing. If you wanted to simulate that, you could run your test, change the seed from the test. I mean, you could change the seed 10 times and just see if you throw different data at it,
or have CI use a random seed. But like at least during like development, I get stable test runs, and then I think even when you run RSpec, they'll say like ran with seed XYZ, and then you can
you can rerun it with that seed and see exactly the order of the test that it went in. Yep, because they also shouldn't. That's another thing that can happen. They're order dependent, and you'd want to be able to rerun them in the order that they failed in. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So same idea there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good takeaways there.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely thought it was interesting though. Definitely made me hate fake test data, then appreciate it, then go back to hating it.
Should we announce our $100 million seed run for MirageUI.com?
Yeah, with fake test data.
Just gotta get our hands on some of that money, I guess. All right, shall we wrap it?
Yeah.
Enjoy some of this weather. Man, it looks awesome. It's just a tease. Like literally the most perfect place on the planet right now. Manhattan in October, 75 degrees, bright blue skies. And then 2 months from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks, right.
2 weeks, it'll be 30 degrees.
I still like it before December because I think it's still a little romantic, get the holidays and everything. January, February hits and you're just like, oh my gosh, everyone has seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, it's the week that daylight savings happens.
Yes.
It is. Oh, God. And it's like it's 4:30 and it's pitch black out.
Oh, yeah. Man. That just makes me angrier at daylight savings. Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Let's wrap it. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.